I'm excited today to talk to you about this book, Loner, another solo RPG. There are actually many books in this series, and it is described as a minimalist solo RPG that lets you embark on incredible adventures across any genre or setting. We're going to look here first at the revised third edition. There's a couple of main books, and then there are some genre specific books, and they all work with the same system. This video is a long time in coming because the designer of the game system reached out to me maybe probably a year ago, I guess. I'm not sure exactly. I don't see, here we go, about coverage of this game, and I asked him to send me digital copies, as I do, because I didn't want to just accept physical copies, and we miscommunicated, and I thought I never got them, and I forgot about it until I reached back out to him because I had heard about this just from someone else, and it sounded interesting, and then when I looked in my email, I realized we had had the miscommunication. So it's been on my radar more or less for a bit. The game system itself is one that promises to work with many genres, and I'm going to show you through the series of books that I have how it actually does do that. It is a system that really works with keywords and prompts and tagging as opposed to specific detailed dice mechanics, although there are dice in the game. One of the new maybe it's this one, does show you how to do it diceless. I'm not going to get into that because I personally wouldn't play it diceless, but I do want to go through and explain. You can see here basically 4d6s. It's not a journaling game, and it will explain that to you, but it is what says right here. Loner is not a journaling game. It does provide a framework, a narrative framework. So you might want to play it by writing some things down to remember what you're doing here. And I will give you an example. So here's an example character, and the books have more or less carry through this character, maybe another one. And you could see here, this is the whole, what would be essentially the entire character sheet. You could see there aren't specific numeric stats. There's a concept. There are some skills that are meant to be suggestive of what that person would have advantage in if they were using that skill. There is what's called a frailty or a drawback. They have some gear that you make up. They have a goal that you make up, and there are some random tables to support all of this. Motives, they have a nemesis, again, something that you would create. And then they do have this one stat of luck with the number there, luck 6. Everybody starts out with luck 6. The enemies start out with luck 6. The NPCs do, you do, and indeed everything in this world that you're creating, whatever world it is considered a character. So even if it's, say, a car or a ship or a facility that you're entering, it has its own keywords, it has its own luck, and it is considered a character. Well, why is that? The reason why is that the way the game works is by taking the prompts that you have for your character and the prompts that are created in the world that you're interacting with and applying those to the very basic D6 rolling and oracle and using that to give you an outcome of a scene. So here is the basic oracle. You've got your 2d6 in one color that are your chance dice and your 2d6 in another that are your risk dice. So for me, I'm going to say the risk dice are these kind of more risky colored, fire colored ones, and my chance are the black ones. What you're going to do is you're going to roll one of each and then decide what the outcome is. So here I'm going to say, let's just say, for example, will it rain today? I'm showing you something outside of the RPG world because I wanted you to see how the tags and the prompts in this game work. Is it going to rain today? So we roll the dice here and we see we got a 3 and a 1. So the question is, which is the higher die? So in this particular case, the chance dice is higher, so it is going to rain, yes. Then you check to see if you have modifiers. And if both of the dice are greater than or equal to 3, which in this case, less than or equal to 3, which in this case they are, you add a but. So the answer in this particular case with this roll is it is going to rain today, but, well, it's going to rain today, but maybe it won't rain that much or it won't rain that hard or whatever the case may be. Now, in this case, you could see here, if we got the yes and the both of the dice were going to be greater than or equal to 4. So if instead of that roll we got, say we got a 5 and a 4. So the answer still here is yes, because the chance die is higher. But since they're both greater than or equal to 4, we get an and. So it's going to rain today and it's going to rain money or it's going to rain men, whatever. So that is the way you get a modifier on there. And then you want to know how the second die comes in. Well, if you're doing that same roll and you're rolling with advantage, so let's say we're going to ask the question, is it going to rain today? And I happen to be a meteorologist who has access to some weather predicting algorithm or whatever. I'm going to roll with advantage and I'm going to roll an extra chance die. So it's more likely to be in my favor. And so I roll that. And then I take the better of those two rolls to get the answer there. Now, in this particular case, the better of those two rolls actually makes me end up rolling a double. When you roll a double, whatever it is, whether it's a fail or an success, you then add a twist. So you go to the twist table and you add 1 to your twist counter, and the counter starts at 0. And once you get to 3, a twist occurs. And then when the third double in a row occurs, whatever the outcome, you then turn to the twist table and you roll on here to get some sort of a twist in your story for your next scene. Similarly, to go back to this advantage and disadvantage, the way that works, if you are going to be rolling with disadvantage, what you would do then is you would roll 2 risk dice and 1 chance die. So you would then take, on that case, the better or the more significant of the 2. In this case, it would be the 6. So that would be a negative outcome. Now, in this particular case, it would have been a negative outcome regardless. But you could see how the use of the adding in the second die, whether you are rolling with advantage to give you more of a chance of doing something or disadvantage to make it more risky and less of a chance, how that adds some subtlety to the oracle. And that is very much the basic die rolling system of this entire RPG. There is a way of translating this system into combat, and the use of that 1 stat that you saw that was considered to be luck. And I'm not going to talk about that now. I'm going to talk about that later in the video. What I want to go back to now is the general concepts in this system that also carry through with all of the genres. And so I want to get into a little bit more on how one would actually create a character and how these tags work. But before I do that, I do want to go to the credits here because it's important to note, as the author does back here, that the Freeform Universal Role-Playing Game by Nathan Russell was inspiration for this whole game as well as the character traits. And that's a pretty significant acknowledgement to make for understanding how this works and where it came from. So I'm going to move from this book. So this has some updated information. It honestly is slightly confusing to me which is the best one to recommend that you get, because in this book there is a reference to looking for the adventure packs, which are random tables for different types of themes, but I don't actually think they're in this book. So I'm going to go to this volume, which is the complete second edition. You can see it's thicker. These are the basic rules. The basic rules are also in here, but the rest of it are these adventure packs. And the adventure packs have tables for different genres of themes and themes that you might want to play. But let's go back and look again at the character creation and understanding here that everything is a character. So we have these living characters and non-living characters, and they are created by having character traits and basically descriptive tags and details that come from, I call them prompts, but they are keywords that will define the concept and the types, therefore, of advantage and disadvantage you may get. So it gives an example here. A concept is a concise description of the character's profession, background, and abilities. The best are adjective name pairings like a venturous smuggler or a child prodigy, as opposed to something like a wizard. You give yourself some skills, frailty, 2 gear, some goal and a motive and a nemesis, and then that stat of luck. And again, you're coming up with these things yourself. There are prompts in the book. There are a bunch of D6 tables that will give you ways to roll on to get these prompts if you want that, or you could just make it up yourself. And when we look at the individual volumes, we'll take a look at some of those tables. So here is the discussion of the conflict. And so now we're going to look at how do you do combat in this game? How do you do fighting? So this is where it may be more of a leap for some people to get their mind around the way you have to envision the combat. Or conflict is, because it says conflict is not limited to combat, for example. It's using harm and luck as the resolution for that. So when you go to the Oracle table, when you get your yes, it's the same basic dice rolling system. But when you get your answer to that system, you refer to this Oracle table. You have the answer here as to what it means, and then whether you are causing harm damage or you're taking harm damage. And taking harm damage means you are reducing your luck. And when you run out of luck, you have won. That is the winner of that combat situation. So you could see, well, here it gives this example here that we'll look at. This is the character that goes through the game examples. Zara's confronting a thug in an alley. He's a martial artist and he has hand-to-hand combat, feline and short. So he tries to hit him with the knife, and this is what he throws. So he gets a yes and, which then causes the luck to go down 3 for the person he's attacking. And then the thug is going to then, says, throws a roundhouse kick at Zara. Yes, but causing a luck of 1 to Zara. And then you have to sort of envision what that actually means. So I will say that you need to rely pretty heavily on your own narrative skills and theater of mind when doing combat interactions here, because you're not going to necessarily have like a table to roll on to kind of give you the outcome of something, that a descriptive outcome of something. And everybody does just have, each entity is always going to enter with 6 luck. So there's a way in which when you get into so here's some sample NPCs in this book. If you are, let's just say you're interacting with this person and say it's like a social combat. I think this is where a social combat feels more natural to this system than the physical combat, because if you were interacting with this art thief, let's say you were trying to hire this guy, for example, and you were having a social interaction with him, you could use the knowledge that he's maybe scared to use your own power over him to interact with the die rolling, say to say that you have an advantage or he has a disadvantage, and count the harm and the luck down until the outcome was, you got what you wanted. You hired this guy or whatever it was, as opposed to if you're interacting with, say, this ravenous crocodile versus a savage gorilla. At a certain point in combat, there's going to be an actual yes or no kind of, it's more binary, like a winner or a loser. You're either going to get eaten by the crocodile or you're going to escape. So you could see where you need to, in your mind, rely more on talking out loud or writing it down as to what each of the outcomes of the die rolling mean in terms of taking away harm or sort of imposing harm on somebody or losing your own luck. But it is the same basic system. And then the rest of the, there is one more table here about switching scenes and whether you go into a dramatic scene, a quiet scene, or just kind of a meanwhile, maybe like something else is going on. And then the rest of this book, the complete second edition, has these adventure packs. And the adventure packs are essentially, they are for all of these different types of themes, and we'll look at some of them. And they are essentially some description of what a setting might be, but mostly just random tables. So you have here, and these could be useful, obviously, not only with this system, but there's just great D6 random tables, and they have some frailties listed, gear listed that might be within that setting, special rules for magic here, and some spells. They have NPCs, or these are factions that you could, they're not numbered, which was curious to me, but there are factions, NPCs, you could get them randomly or not, some sample monsters, locations, and then a adventure seeds. So a D66, nice 36 entry table of adventure seeds for fantasy. And then the same thing more or less goes for space. You have the setting information, you have character concepts, so a space engineer, trained in physics perhaps, or survival. So just really fast tables to get a character going. Perhaps this is a starship and it's a factory ship, or it is a space yacht. Just those types of quick, I call them like seeds, but they're called tags in this game, are going to be the basis for how you develop that thing, that entity, that contributing character to your story. We have space factions as well, the Alien Collective or the Extraterrestrial Liberation Front. So these are alien rights activists, and they have the skills of guerrilla tactics and stealth. So perhaps, and their frailty is a lack of resources. So perhaps if you were encountering something in this space world that you were running, and you say you even rolled randomly here to determine that they came from this faction, you could factor that in, maybe that knowing that they might be hungry or they might need be more open to trade with you because they lack resources, and then use that decision to say, well, I'm rolling with advantage here because I have that thing, or it's going to be easier for me to get them to do what I want because I have that thing. We have some creatures here and some locations, and again, the whole table of adventure seeds. So these are just for all these different genres, and I'm not going to go through all of these things, but you could just see the range of genres here. Let's see what the special rule was for superheroes. These are superpower. There's a special superpower rule here, and so they get some automatic benefit for that. And there are, to reflect the fact that it's like a superhero, you get hero points, which are basically 3 free rerolls during the course of the game. So that's thematic to superhero and adventure seeds, and just it goes on and on. So in this one particular book, if you're interested in this system and how it can work with various themes that you might not normally use, I would say this is the book to get first, because it has the main rules as well as these various different, totally different themes. And it has a spy theme. That's always a little tough for me to kind of deal with, but you have here the framework for what you need. And I think, of course, you could mix and match here. You could do a sort of a spy kind of space thing or such. Now, there's also this book, and this is just a companion book. And basically what this book does is it will answer some questions. It elaborates on the rules and the examples. You could just see from the text itself, the examples are longer and a little bit more explanatory if you need that. And it's sort of everything. It explains everything basically that is in this book. So I think personally, I think it would be good to just sort of maybe put these two books together as one and take out the reference in here to the adventure packs, which are actually not in this book, but they are in this book. So those are the main rules. And what exists in addition to that are individual books that are, they say, geared toward loner. And these are published by the same person, and they are very much detailed, different themes built out into with tons of random tables and much more detail of things like what the daily life would be. This is a kind of like a Camelot situation here, and you get thematically related creatures and foes and they all have they're all with all their descriptions and adventure seeds, different encounters, court intrigues, NPCs and allies. So you get a full, this is really probably the most detailed of all the theme books that go with it. You actually get the basic oracle here and the rules, so you don't really actually need to. And you do get the twist counter, which is the key thing to that. So, and this is also, you get a sort of explanation of how to use this with a magic system. So this is self-contained. I think you don't, if you were interested in playing Camelot, don't think you need the main rule book. There is a kind of steampunk version of this. I love steampunk. I've never probably done a solo RPG with steampunk, but I do love it. And again, the theme appropriate tables, cogwork familiar traits, and steamboat traits. So how to run urban adventures and places to stop in the world and get things. So pretty succinct, a lot of flavor here, I think, but combined with the tables, you get your seeds and city district encounters and things. You could see how you could play out a story there. Yes, there is a dungeon one. I think that this has a ton of cool things for a dungeon crawl. This is where, and you've got like a spell list here and the spell effect. So the spells, you have complications and room types. So you have like a dungeon generator as well as the enemies here and the types of different monsters. Again, this is where I think in a combat heavy game, I would struggle with this system myself. And when I tried to play, of course, I went right to the Dungeoneer one. I almost think in a way it works the least well for a strict dungeon crawl. It's really more about building out narrative and story from prompts. And dungeon crawls don't really lend themselves to that. That said, there are great tables in here, and I'm certain I'll be using these tables for something else. Traps and environmental hazards and ambushes and minor treasures and puzzles and things that definitely go into a dungeon crawl, but there is just, you could run it using the rest of the rules. Pulp adventures. This is what I think it really lends itself well to, these kind of bigger than life, like the Camelot, the pulp adventures, where you would be able to easily, I think, um, expand and extrapolate upon a word or a phrase into the theme, because the theme lends itself to that type of overblown and overdetermined storytelling. And again, just more tables here. You could just pause if you want to see the list of the tables that are here. I know we're getting a little long in the video. Steel and Sorcery, another very substantive volume here. This could easily be combined with some of the other ones. This is you're a wandering sword, a doomed warlock, a survivor, carving a path through a world of ruin and peril. And you have tables for cursed items and warrior traditions, tribal origins, and rites of passage. So a lot of great stuff here just in the random tables. And then the last two, or there's three more that I received. There's a Mech Requiem and a Japanese kind of supernatural Japan volume that are way outside of my wheelhouse, but they do exist. And then finally, there's even one for kids. And I'll say, as you know, if you watch the channel, I do DM for kids. I think the issue with this here is it's geared really toward very young children. And I think in looking through it myself, I felt a little bit that on the one hand, it's geared slightly too young for the concepts. I'll say I have not run this with kids. So it's like here they're talking about younger kids 3 to 4. I have a particular bias here, I think, about I think with kids 3 or 4, you could do a lot with just a T6 and then that's it. So I think for my personal gameplay with kids, it probably is too much for that young age and maybe not enough for most of the kids that I DM for now are older, and this is probably not enough for that. But that said, it does exist, and I wanted to point it out to all the people out there who might be DMing for kids, because, of course, anything, in my opinion, that is an analog game for kids is something to be celebrated. So I do appreciate the fact that it is here. So that's a look at Loner, and I think for a narrative based, especially when you're looking at these kind of like bigger than life themes and genres, the pulp, the Camelot, this really lends itself quite nicely to it. And even if not, the basic oracle system and all of the tables is useful material for the soloist.